Joining us now from the United States, we can sit back here in Australia and laugh at Joe Biden, but John Hinderaker, the brilliant editor of the Powerline blog, has to actually live in it. He joins us now from Minneapolis. Great to see you, John, and Happy New Year. How are you?
Doing great. Happy New Year to you.
Okay, so James has just been talking about the whole Ukraine thing. So what's the latest, John? Biden made this weird speech. What's the latest in the States, and what's the latest fears or thoughts surrounding Ukraine?
Well, I don't think much has happened since the press conference. As we saw just a couple of minutes ago, Biden refused to answer questions about Russia, or refused to take questions for fear there would be one about Russia. The president of Ukraine has expressed shock at the minor incursion statement from Biden. And I think Putin is just sitting there planning his next move. He's already been told by Joe Biden that if he does a minor incursion, then the NATO allies will be fighting about what to do. That's a pretty juicy prospect if you're Vladimir Putin.
Exactly. James.
Well, so what are people in the United States right now concerned about this? We saw in the news this morning here that the U.S. Embassy has started to evacuate family members of diplomats from Kiev. So, it seems like embassy evacuation season just comes around earlier and earlier every year now under the Biden administration. Are people concerned, though, that this really is going to wind up with Russia making a move in the Ukraine? And is that going to wind up leading potentially to a conflict with NATO?
It's really interesting, James. Americans don't tend to care much about foreign policy. History tells us that absent a total disaster, there's two things Americans care about. Number one, they don't like to see Americans getting killed. Number two, they don't like to see America humiliated. And right now, I don't think the level of concern is real high with the average man in the street here in the U.S. I don't think most people care all that much about this Ukraine situation that's been kind of boiling for some years now. But if something happens that is seen by Americans to be an embarrassment, a humiliation for this country, then I think that the Democrats are going to pay a real political price.
Rita.
And they should also pay a price for the last 4 years of hysteria and conspiracy theories. I mean, we were told Donald Trump was a Russian asset, he's Putin's man in the White House, and it wasn't until he was out of office and the Democrats were in that Putin has made his big move.
Well, if you look at the objective reality as opposed to the propaganda, there's all kinds of ways in which Joe Biden has been a boon to the Russians. I mean, for example, the only pipelines in the world that the Biden administration is in favor of are Russian pipelines. They've been doing all they can to suppress natural gas production here in the U.S., and that does more for Russia than anything they could do. And just a couple of days ago, the Biden administration announced that they were withdrawing their support for an Israeli natural gas pipeline, which again would have provided alternative sources of natural gas in that part of the world. The only one they're in favor of is Russia's. And so if you want to ask who is it that is objectively helping the Russians out, it's the Biden administration.
John, we just want to play you this grab. Energy prices are going through the roof in the States. Just have a listen to this.
Heating oil doubled from last year. Went from $400 and some to almost $1,000.
Wow.
And that's probably going to be once a month until March or April. I'm a vet. And what happened in Afghanistan bothers me to no end. And I just think the whole economy is a mess. And I have to blame that on Joe.
So there you have it. People who, traditional working class people who you would think would be supporters of Joe Biden. Obviously, many were wisely supporters of Trump. But the inflation, the economy is biting hard.
Yeah, the inflation is a huge problem. It's probably Americans' number one concern. And where it's really hitting the hardest is energy, gas at the pump, home heating. These prices have exploded. And the Democrats are conflicted here because the truth is they want higher prices for gas and oil because that's part of their plan to convert to green energy.
Yeah.
The problem is that when the price of gasoline goes to $4.50 at the pump, that's a terrible thing for the average American's budget, and there are terrible political consequences for the Democrats. So they're kind of caught in between. The truth is they want energy prices to rise, but they can never admit that to the voters.
And the voters are blaming them, like we heard there. When you go around America and you're pumping gas, often you'd see a little Joe Biden sticker on the price pump with a finger pointing saying, I did that. So they're actually this grassroots campaign to remind people why they're paying so much. I want to just quickly ask you about voter rights. Biden has gone absolutely mad with this, basically saying if you don't support his policies, you're a white supremacist and you want to drag America back 50 years. Tell us about that argument.
Well, this so-called voting rights bill that they're trying to ram through the Senate would federalize elections in the United States, which is not the way the Constitution set it up. Among other things, this bill would make voter ID requirements illegal. It would essentially institutionalize voter fraud. Now, 75 to 80% of Americans say they favor voter ID, and at least 30 states have got some kind of voter ID requirement. And nevertheless, the Democrats are trying to make that illegal. What they call voting rights is really just an effort to make honest elections impossible.
Well, they've done it once, they'll do it again. They could always show their arrest warrants, John. We've learned that arrest warrants are a form of ID that are admissible in America now. John, I want to ask you about something else, Biden, another disturbing aspect. We had the dreadful Texas hostage situation, a synagogue, and it turned out to be someone from the UK, from Blackburn, Lancashire, an Islamist. But Biden couldn't seem to see any connection between why an Islamist would be attacking a synagogue. Now, what was the fallout from this bizarre brain snap of Biden's?
Well, we see this all the time, Rowan. I mean, it's always the mystery when the terrorist is yelling Allahu Akbar and shooting people. And these people, his motive is a mystery. We just can't figure out why he did it. It's another episode of workplace violence or whatever they, and this is another one in that genre. Here's a guy obviously anti-Semitic. He flies all the way from England to this obscure town in Texas to attack a synagogue and take Jews hostage. Then he makes him call this rabbi in New York, and he's making all these anti-Semitic comments. But it's not only Biden; it's the liberals in the U.S. who just never want to acknowledge what's motivating so many of these terrorist incidents. Here they finally did come around. The FBI originally put out a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
His motive is a mystery. Doesn't appear to have to do with anti-Semitism. But they did a day or two later, they corrected that. And I think where we are seeing some fallout here is in the American Jewish community. I mean, this was so ridiculous that I think that there was some pretty serious blowback from that community. And I think that's why we saw the administration, to some degree at least, changing its tune.
Well, hallelujah. About time, James.
John, I just want to cast your mind forward, not just to the midterms, but actually to the next presidential election. Now, there's a lot of talk that Biden is a one-term president if he makes it through. I'm hearing rumors that they are going to try and resuscitate Hillary Clinton again.
Yes.
Are we actually going to see this happen? Because I'm looking at the Democrats' bench, and it doesn't look all that deep.
There is no Democrat bench. They talk about Pete Buttigieg, as a serious presidential candidate. And that fact is nothing that brings that fact home, like the idea that they're talking seriously about dredging up Hillary Clinton for another run. I saw a poll just yesterday that has Donald Trump beating Joe Biden by 5 points in a rematch. Now,
wow.
I don't think either Donald Trump or Joe Biden is going to be on the ticket in 2024. But the Democrats have a terrible problem. I think they would like to ease Joe Biden out. The problem is if they do that, What do they do with Kamala Harris? She is even more popular than Biden, and she has shown no political skill whatsoever. And that's why you see trial balloons going up like maybe we should run Hillary again.
So just very quickly, John, if not Trump, who?
Well, I'd like to see Ron DeSantis, the very, very successful governor of Florida, who's, by the way, 43 years old. Can we please get out of this geriatric era of American politics? Please. I'd love to see DeSantis.
Why can't we have DeSantis have 4 years as VP and then he can have his 8 years?
Trump DeSantis ticket.
Yes.
Or what about Mike Pompeo?
Yeah.
He can be DeSantis's VP. It's all planned.
Pompeo's got a chance?
Well, I'm a Pompeo fan, but the thing about DeSantis is that governors tend to do better in presidential politics because they have a track record. They've actually administered a state. And Ron DeSantis has got a tremendous record to run on there in Florida.
Fantastic. John Hinderaker, always great to chat to you. Powerline blog, people can read you and subscribe there. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you.